Hello and welcome back to Eye on Iowa. I'm Sarah Mueller, a reporter with Forbes, and today I'm joined by Iowa State Representative Brent Siegrist. Thank you so much for joining us. I have a couple of questions about your support for Governor Ron DeSantis for president. First of all, will you just tell me what led you to the decision to support him?
Well, this is my second time through the legislature, so I've been through quite a few different presidential caucuses. The main thing that was driving me was that despite the fact that I think President Trump did a lot of good things when he was president, I don't think he's our best candidate this time. And so I was looking for the person that I thought would have the best shot to actually defeat President Trump and become the nominee. And after looking at all the candidates, I came down to Governor DeSantis. I think he's got a proven record in Florida. He campaigns hard, and I just thought that he was a person that could be president and could run a good campaign and actually have a shot at the nomination.
Now we had an Iowa poll come out just yesterday, and so I want to go through some of the numbers with you. At 43% is President Donald Trump. At 16%, there's a tie between Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. At 7% is Senator Tim Scott. At 4% is Vivek Ramaswamy, and another 4% is Chris Christie. At 3% is Doug Burgum, 1% Asa Hutchinson, and 0% Ryan Binkley. That's with a margin of error of 4.9%. Now, obviously, DeSantis is behind Trump significantly. How do you think he's going to catch up in the next 2.5 months?
Well, obviously, it's going to be a difficult task. If you look at the crosstabs on the Iowa poll, and obviously the Iowa poll is a very, very respected poll. President Trump has a lot of his people are solid. They're not going to move. But nonetheless, there's 57% of the caucus goers that were interviewed that were looking for somebody else other than President Trump. So, I'm not telling the people that are watching this anything they don't know. If we could get it down to a 2 or 3 person race, I think whoever those other two people are besides Trump will have a shot to actually overtake them. And so I think that's what Governor DeSantis is trying to do. Have the best showing in Iowa, be the second place finisher. He'd love to be first, but I'm going to be realistic. And if he could come up at second place in Iowa and move to New Hampshire, there is an Iowa bump that comes, and I think that's the philosophy they're pursuing.
Now there's multiple candidates in this race. It's pretty dense. We have a couple that have already dropped out, but there are some candidates that are spending way more time here in Iowa than others. For example, Chris Christie has barely stepped foot in the state. Meanwhile, there are candidates like Vivek Ramaswamy, DeSantis, Nikki Haley, who are spending a lot of time here. How do you think the ground game is different for DeSantis than some of these other candidates in getting those voters' attention?
Well, I think the governor got a lot of press, several months ago about burning through his campaign funds, and they've recalibrated that. But that was because he has a lot of people on the ground here in Iowa, and that's how you win the Iowa caucuses. You have to be present, and you have to really move through the state. So I think that he's done a very good job of that. Tim Scott has said now he's all in, and he's a good candidate. I don't think he's probably going to catch fire. I do think in the end it comes down to in terms of second and third place, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, and they're both putting a lot of their eggs in the basket here. But I think Governor DeSantis has said he needs to do well in Iowa to push ahead into New Hampshire, and then of course South Carolina. So I was very, very critical for the governor. He's going to be back in Des Moines on next Monday, I believe, and he was just here over the weekend. So they're putting the time in here, and that's how you win in Iowa.
It's an interesting race this year because it feels like certain people are surging ahead and you think they're going to, get some real ground on Donald Trump, and then they kind of pull back. For example, I was talking this morning with another expert about how Tim Scott had gotten a lot of good press at the beginning of the year, and now he's really drawn back. Vivek did well after the debates, and now he's also pulling back. Nikki is obviously surging right now. So, I mean, just from your point of view, do you think that you would ever change your endorsement? We've had a couple of people switch sides a little bit. Would you ever change your endorsement given that DeSantis is right up against Nikki Haley as well?
Oh, you never rule anything out because you want to listen to the debates and see what's going on. In my mind, aside from President Trump, the top two candidates are Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. I could be comfortable with either one of them, but I made the choice to go with Governor DeSantis, and so I'm still there, and that's where I plan on staying. So unless something happens.
Now you're obviously an Iowan. You're here in Iowa. What are you hearing from voters? What do you hear is the most important issues to them? What are you hearing on the ground?
You do hear a lot about the border, and that's a big sticking point. And obviously, President Biden has not handled that well. The conflict in the Mideast right now is certainly getting some play from different people. But I've heard about the border. I don't hear as much about the economy because the economy in Iowa is doing fairly well right now. But I think there is concern with foreign affairs as well as the border are the main things that I've been hearing about. And then some of the cultural issues obviously do pop up in caucuses because those are your pretty dedicated Republicans, or it used to be dedicated Democrats when they had the caucuses. And so some of those issues are more important at a local level than they may be at a national level.
Obviously, you were talking earlier about how people who are in the Trump camp are really sticking to the Trump camp. And the big question is around independent and moderate voters this time. What do you think DeSantis needs to do to appeal to those moderate voters?
Well, I think he's trying to appeal to them in terms of pointing out what his record is in Florida. I do think he has hit the social issues, the wokeism, and so on pretty hard, which is an important issue, but that's not always one of the biggest issues when it comes to the moderates and independents, which you'll need to win the presidency. So I think he's going to continue to focus on what he believes his record shows and his abilities show that he did and has done in Florida, and that is of great concern and of a lot of enthusiasm for what he's accomplished in Florida, and I think that appeals to a lot of the caucus goers here. Florida and Iowa have done a lot of the same type of things in terms of moving the state ahead, so people are pretty aware of what the governor has done in Florida.
Speaking of governors, Governor Kim Reynolds used to be pretty good buddies with President Donald Trump. And in the last couple of weeks, Trump has made numerous comments kind of slamming Kim Reynolds. How do you think that's going to impact Trump's campaign here in Iowa to get Iowans to caucus for him?
I don't think that particular thing is going to impact Donald Trump that much. I don't think it was very wise for him to start criticizing Governor Reynolds, who has been a good ally of his and is very popular in the state. But again, I think that he probably hasn't lost a lot of people there. The people that are solidly with President Trump are there, regardless if he insults a very popular governor. I think the bigger issue there would be is whether or not Governor Reynolds actually endorses somebody in the end. That could be a big thing. But as governor, she's got to be pretty careful about that too. Right now, if she were to endorse, let's say, Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, or I don't care, Doug Burgum, and Trump becomes the nominee, there's some downside to that. So I'm not exactly sure what the governor's going to do, but she is very popular, and she's played it pretty balanced so far, and I hope she continues to do that.
Governor Reynolds' name has been thrown around a little bit to be maybe a possible VP candidate, especially for Trump, if things kind of even out between them. What do you think of that?
I think she's a very talented person. I've known Governor Reynolds since the 90s. When she was a county treasurer, and my first time through the legislature, I was majority leader and also Speaker of the House, and she used to lobby me. So we go back a ways. So I'm impressed with the governor. She's got a lot of political acumen, has done a really good job as governor. Whether or not she would be a vice presidential candidate, she says she doesn't want it. On the other hand, if it gets offered, I'm sure she would take it. But I think if it was Donald Trump, you would look at some of the other candidates that are out there. Nikki Haley might bring as a former governor and ambassador to the UN, might bring a little more experience to that ticket. But obviously, if the Governor Reynolds was chosen, we would wholeheartedly support her. If she isn't chosen and there's a Republican administration, I could easily see Governor Reynolds replacing Tom Vilsack, as Secretary of Agriculture, somebody in the cabinet, and she would be very, very adept at that. So hopefully there's a future for her one way or another in the national scene.
Before I let you go, do you have any final message to Iowans who are maybe still uncertain of who they're going to caucus for in 2.5 months?
Not really. Iowans are very smart about this whole thing. They've been through it many times. The thing I would say is make sure you're voting for somebody that will be able to carry the party in November 2024. Not just worry about Iowa, but what about the national scene? What candidate will help us defeat President Biden and will also help us get control or maintain control of the House and try to get control of the Senate? I think we have several candidates that can do that. We have a couple that I think would not be our best choices there. So that's what I would say. Make sure you're voting for the person that's going to do the best overall for the party, helping us take control of Washington, D.C., which would be the best thing for our nation.
Representative Siegrist, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to seeing you and a lot of other national journalists moving in.